Good whenever you're watching this. Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast, Episode 6. Thank you to Deb, aka Heretic Woman, for joining me last week. She's only done 19 hours of Google Hangouts since we chatted last week. So tonight we're going to talk to the man, the myth, the legend, Jim Dobler. He calls himself the PR director for No Religion Required, but in truth he's just the most generous person I've ever met, according to Bobby C., so that means a lot. Thanks to the double secret probation Facebook group that we both frequent, I got Jim to agree to join me on short notice. So happy Fat Tuesday, Jim.
And to you too.
And this evening I'm drinking a Sweetwater Festive Ale because I drink local unless I don't.
That's a good idea. Drinking coffee, which is in no way local.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know how North Carolina was known for their coffee thing. So Jim, what brings us here today? So what is your kind of background, like with religion, your family, whatever you want to say about that? Excuse my cat
Okay.
having visits.
Yeah, I did grow up with religious parents. My mother was a lot more religious than my father. She was the one who felt it very important that we all go to church. I grew up in the Episcopal Church. It was fairly moderate. There wasn't a whole lot of preaching about hellfire or anything like that, but I never really felt like I belonged in there. I don't remember a time that I actually believed. I said my prayers because my mother stood there and watched, but I never really felt like there was some entity on the other side listening to any of it. Uh,
It's always interesting that so far from what I've heard, it's kind of like the mom pushing the family to go to the church.
I had an interesting theory on that. Mom being at home, dad working, mom was always a lot closer to us. And I think she, though being an otherwise rational person, couldn't let go of the idea that she'd see her children again in heaven.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a community part of it too, and then it's like, well, in order to raise my kids, I should take them to church because that's what my parents did, and look at me. I think that kind of comes up sometimes too.
I could definitely see that, although she recognized that I wasn't a part of that community and insisted on my going until I was old enough to stay home by myself and just not go. Even then, she said, well, maybe it's just not the right church for you. Always encouraged me to do something. She said I needed to believe in some kind of God. And she didn't much care if I decided to become a Jewish or a Muslim or anything. She was actually pretty open-minded and had friends of just about all faiths, but she thought believing in a higher power was of the utmost importance regardless.
Yeah, just believe in something. And by the way, here's Chewy once again, not
Hi, Kat.
enjoying himself at the moment. He just likes to kind of get in the middle of this game. He's like, find a spot and take it easy, and you'll be just fine. Did you have a kind of a moment? Was there like a eureka moment, or did you just one day just say, you know what, I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic, this is done?
Yeah, yeah, I went with agnostic for a while. Like I said, there was not a eureka moment. I definitely didn't have any kind of strong deconversion. It was, at best, mild belief, no more so than a small child would believe in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. And it just, a gradual falling away from even that. Like, I just don't think there's anything there. I self-identified as agnostic for a while just because of the understanding what that word meant and the without knowledge of, which still describes me, but atheism without a God also describes me, so I guess I'm an agnostic atheist, and probably was all along. I just didn't know what to call it or how I felt about it. I just felt it.
It's funny you grow up like not knowing what. It's like there's something that describes me, but I can't figure it out. And then you get a term, and go, oh, that's me. Close enough. Doesn't mean you have to relate with everybody else or follow them along. So do you have any like issues with family now because you kind of split off, or not really?
I never really did. I will give my mother credit, despite being very religious. When she found out I wasn't, she was disappointed, but didn't shun me or anything that maybe she might have had she been Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon. She just kept quietly encouraging me from the background to move on. My father really didn't seem upset at all. My brother shares my lack of faith, but seems to have no interest in joining an atheist group or going to any of the conferences. Part of the problem is he's got a son, and he's divorced, and his son's mother is a believer too and wants the kid to go to church, and he probably feels like he needs to bite his lip and not say anything about it because that was the agreement.
Yeah, that's a tough situation, especially the divorce involved.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you at least can get to talk to kids. Do you have kids?
I do not, no.
Okay, I didn't know about raising kids in the environment, but I guess that's not an issue then. Well, how did you get to meet up with Bobby C. and Miss Ashley, and become their PR director? No religion required.
Well, I discovered podcasts and podcast. I had heard of podcasts for probably 5 or 6 years. 2 years ago, I got a smartphone. I never had an iPod or anything like that, and realized that I could download podcatching software for free when I was checking out Google Play, and just went skimming through titles. The first thing I found that sounded interesting, excuse me, other than the NPR shows I always listen to every week, was The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. I started off listening to that for a while and found a few other skeptical shows. And I was enjoying them, but at work I'm a custodian, so I have quite a bit of time to just put on the headphones and listen while I'm doing what I need to do, because I don't have to interact with people all day long. And so I started looking for more things. Like, I bet there's atheist podcasts out there. So started looking, found quite a few, but not a whole lot I liked right off the bat, but other than Cognitive Dissonance. Through them, I found Atheists on Air. Through Atheists on Air, I found No Religion Required, and probably started listening about 5 episodes into Bobby's podcast, but I went back to number 1 and listened all the way through. We signed up for ReasonCon because I heard about it from both podcasts. We went on a Saturday. My wife and I were standing out in the parking lot, puffing on these. We have these little vapes, I guess you call them. And Bobby and Ashley were outside smoking, and Bobby came over to ask me if it worked or not, and I brought over Misty to meet him. When I saw his name tag, I'm like, this is who we were listening to in the car on the way here. Oh, really? And she seemed kind of excited by the idea, and then Bobby called Ashley over. Ashley didn't say a whole lot that trip. I think she was definitely in observation mode, although I didn't realize at that time that she wasn't yet an atheist or anywhere close to it. And so she was just waiting to see who we were and what we were all about. But yeah, we got along very well with Bobby. Went out to lunch with him, hung around with him after the lectures at the party, and we just kind of stuck. We visited them in Savannah a couple months after ReasonCon, and they went with us to the Atheists and Humanists Convention in Pittsburgh last year, and they visited a few other times, came up here to see the foliage. They were here just last weekend. We went to the Biltmore Estate and toured that, and had a little local atheist group meet up with the Cabarrus County atheists at Golden Corral before they went back to Savannah.
Yeah, I heard about all that. So how did that go, that kind of breakfast? Like, what was it like to have, be involved in that kind of meet and greet environment?
Well, we had been to a couple of the Forsyth area critical thinkers or FACT in Winston. We'd been to several of their meetings. And we had been to one meeting with the Cabarrus County Atheists before this. And Bobby was talking about how he had enjoyed getting together with the atheist group in Statesboro, Georgia, and their local, what do they call it, CASH, the coastal area secular humanists. And I knew he enjoyed those meetups, and we liked our first meetup with Cabarrus County, and I thought, well, he's here, and we're going to go get breakfast on Sunday anyway. So I asked him if he wanted to do a meetup, and in typical Bobby fashion said, hell yeah. So I contacted the group, and they had me post an event, and then they reposted it to make sure everyone saw it, and I'd say we had between 20 and 25 people there showed up. Some had never heard of the show and just wanted to come for the meetup. You did have a few fans get to talk to him there, and a few more people became fans at the meeting, so I guess he did quite well for himself.
Yeah, who of the two signed more autographs? I was just curious.
I can't say that I saw an autograph being signed.
Okay. Just wanted to see, because I know Bobby calls himself the minion of the show, but you know, I know he's always Mr. behind the scenes. But is it just because you're two as couples are really close that you became you got the title of PR director then?
Well, that started off more or less as a joke. In the early days of his Facebook page, he had very few likes on the page, and I went to the little button that's always on there that says invite your friends to like this page, and just went through my entire list and clicked everyone I knew that was an atheist, and I guess they were all paying attention because somehow 30 of them signed up to like his show within a day's time. And he happened to ask me how it happened so fast. I told him what I did, and he said, well, you need to be our PR director. So I said, fine. I'm putting that as my job on my Facebook page, and turned around and did so the next day. So I guess it's my honorific title now.
Hey, whatever it takes, you know, it's all kind of grassroots when you're getting a show off the ground. So that's pretty cool, because I first discovered the show after the Reason Con, and as soon as I heard about it, I'm like, well, I need to get there. So I'm excited that I'm signed up for this year's version, so it should be fun, because I feel like I've sort of got to know a bunch of the podcasters are going to be there, and then some of the people like you are just going to be there, which is cool as well. So I hear you're from Pittsburgh, and I am as well. So how long were you there? And I don't know, it was like to be a Yinzer.
Oh, well, it's great to be a Yinzer. I feel kind of sad that I didn't realize that as much as I should have before I left. And in traveling around the country, and even to some extent around the world, I've realized more and more that Pittsburgh's got an awful lot more to offer than most cities do. I miss being there, but we're also a 7 to 8 hour drive, depending on how much speeding I care to do, and we get back there fairly frequently.
So when did you live there?
I lived there from, let's see, 67 until 85.
Okay, I was born in 74, and we moved out in 1980, so I wasn't there terribly long, so I don't feel a big connection, but anytime we get up there, which has actually been a few years, it's downtown's really come back to life, so that's kind of cool. Because I just remember as a kid, we'd drive into Pittsburgh, and you'd get that kind of sulfur smell going on because of all the steel factories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely gone now.
It's a weird nostalgic kind of smell in a way. I don't know. So what was it like, when did you get to see David Silverman talk, and where was that?
That was, I want to say, about a month to a month and a half ago. That was in Winston-Salem, the local community arts center. They had a smallish room with a stage set up, and we got the invitation from FACT, and I just decided I wanted to go. Even though it was on a weeknight and it was going to keep me up past 10, it seemed worth it for David Silverman, so we got in the car and headed up, and it was an exceptional event. They had...
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. But they had trying to get as many religions as possible represented. I mean, they had the UU minister and a Jewish, not a rabbi. It was a woman. She was a social director for some synagogue, and they had a Muslim there and two other more progressive ministers. They didn't have any fundamentalist Baptists or Pentecostal ministers there, but it was an interesting exchange of ideas. Basically, the beginning was kind of an airing out of the differences. What do you believe versus what I believe, and what might stop us from working together. And then the second half was, so how do we overcome all these things and work together against fundamentalist types? And I don't know that we got an answer out of all that. They left the discussion kind of open-ended, but all the ministers present agreed to leave an opening for the discussion to continue. So it seemed like a good thing overall.
Well, I think it's cool that it was kind of an interfaith, because I first heard it, I just thought David Silverman talked, but it's, you kind of forget what the way things are going, and if you listen to podcasts, you tend to hear about fundamentalists as opposed to more progressive types. So good to see there are more people who probably would agree with us on church state kind of issues than people who think we need to have some kind of dominionist country.
Yeah, it was. This was the second talk I went to on this subject about 2.5 or 3 months ago. My wife and I went with Bobby and Ashley to Greensboro to hear Jerry DeWitt and Mark Sandlin talk about the same ideas of working together, how atheists could definitely work together with moderate Christians to get something done, because outside of the big question of whether or not there's a God, they agree on most of the other issues like gay marriage and equal rights for everyone, and we all together want to see that. Although that was a whole lot more tame, because Jerry DeWitt and Mark Sandlin are both they're friendly with each other, and there was just a whole bunch of agreeing going on the stage, where at least for the first 10 minutes of the last one we went to with David Silverman, it was a little confrontational, because it was David Silverman, and you know enough to know where that went.
Yeah, he likes to pick a fight, that's for sure. It's always interesting to hear people in different areas talk about all the kind of events they have going on, because I live in Atlanta, which supposedly is a big city, and it just doesn't seem like the events are here that often. Like, there haven't been that many conventions. I went to see Matt Dillahunty kind of debate a local preacher, but that was 5 years ago, and we had a local group that met, and a lot of the Christian groups were there, so it was interesting to see who cheered when, but I kind of thought that Matt kind of wiped the floor with the guy. But it was nice to get to finally talk to him, because Atheist Experience was like the first show I ever listened to, so to get to at least say hi and realize, oh, it's just a guy, not nothing special. But yeah, it was cool to see that in person. But so where are you in North Carolina?
I'm in Salisbury, roughly halfway between Charlotte and Winston-Salem, right on I-85.
Okay, so it's just kind of a straight shot from here. So you're pretty close to Asheville then?
No, actually about 2 hours and 15 minutes from here. That's closer to Tennessee than it is to us, really. We're almost geographical center of the state. Asheville is kind of where it starts to come to a point in the mountains, maybe 100 miles this side of the point. But really, you don't think about it looking on a map, but North Carolina is probably close to 800 miles from Cape Hatteras to that little tip wedges in between Georgia and Tennessee.
Yeah, it's a pretty wide state. That's true. Because I've been to Asheville a few times, and wife and I have gone to a cabin up there, and it's been really cool to get there kind of in the winter because we don't get a lot of winter here. You got a little winter last night. So how far are you going to be from the ReasonCon then?
About an hour and 15 minutes. That's, maybe slightly more than halfway to Asheville from here, but basically drive from Salisbury through Statesville is the next halfway decent-sized town, and Hickory is the next halfway decent-sized town after that, so we're not terribly far.
So you have any, I don't know, words of wisdom as a ReasonCon veteran for someone who's going to be there for the first time? You know, how to survive this event?
Well, I think survive outside of avoiding alcohol poisoning might be the wrong word. I mean, I had a great time. I felt very welcome. I enjoyed the speakers. I enjoyed the time afterward. Of course, in fairness, I won't say I wasn't drinking, but I was drinking very little and certainly not drunk. I saw a few people who probably had a really rough morning the next day, but I didn't experience that myself.
That was Bill in the last Barroom Atheist mentioned something about they're up till 4 a.m. and they may not have actually seen any of the speakers, but they had a really good time. So
yes, they did. Well, yeah, Bill. We had dinner with Bill and Susie that night. We had actually met them about 6 months prior. We went to the Pennsylvania Atheists and Humanists the year before too, and met them in Philadelphia. So ReasonCon was the second time seeing them, but I noticed Bill's more interested in the outside of the conference speaking and just having his group of people at the ready. And while the speaking's going on, he's just as likely to be at the bar finding somebody else from the conference to talk to that stepped out for a while. Which isn't a bad thing, especially if you've seen some of those speakers before. He goes to a lot more conferences than I do. Sometimes he's got a pretty good idea of what's going to be said, and he can maybe pick up on something he hasn't heard by not being there. I know when Bobby and Ashley went to Pittsburgh with us, we met Bill and Susie there, and all of us together skipped probably 75% of the speeches and hung around the bar and kept using the hotel shuttle to run off to various restaurants to have dinner or lunch or drinks or all of the above. And we did have a really good time without attending as much of the conference as we should have, considering we paid for it.
Well, then you get to go to a lot, since it sounds like you've been to a few of the conferences before.
Yeah, I've been to the two Pennsylvania in a row. Been to one ReasonCon, getting ready for the next. And we went to one Carolina secular conference, and we've been to TAM twice, which isn't technically an atheist conference, but it's pretty full of atheists.
Is that the one that's in Vegas, right?
Yes.
That's cool. That's pretty widely traveled. I know there's some kind of humanist conference in Atlanta this year, so at least I'll get to that one. But I wanted to get to one. I was like, well, there's American Atheists in Memphis, which isn't too far from here, but I was like, Hickory, ReasonCon sounded fun. It was like relatively small, but still a pretty good group, and I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be just fine. Good time. Whether you like Bobby not drinking or, like the rest of us maybe drinking. I hear you're a cat magnet, so how did you get to become like the home for all the cats in the local area?
No, it's unreal. Mostly, apparently, if you're a cat, I've got sucker written on my forehead, and there's apparently a big sign on my house somewhere and written in cat language that says, an idiot that will feed you lives here. Actually, the first two in didn't get here that way. The first cat I had, my ex-in-laws live not far from here. I was visiting them, and their next-door neighbor moved out, and basically left a declawed calico cat out to starve to death. And it was emaciated, and I just couldn't let it happen. So I bought a litter box and food and took it home. And it was one of those cats that wasn't very independent. It wanted somebody around all the time. And I pretty quickly realized that when I left the house and went to work, this cat did nothing but sit on the back of the couch and stare at the door and wait for me to come home. I felt bad, and some other friends of mine were visiting for dinner, and their daughter fell in love with it, and I told them they could take it with them, and she got very excited, so it had somebody a lot more and ended up being a much better adjusted cat. In the meantime, I'm thinking, good, no animals. I can travel without making arrangements for somebody to come and feed it. And then my wife went to work one day, and one of her coworkers came in with a box of kittens that got dumped at a gas station, and she brought one home. A year after that, a stray turned up on our back porch, sitting out there meowing at the one inside. So took it to the vet, and got the shots, and brought it inside. It just happened again about a month ago. We had a cat crawl into a broken vent in our crawl space, and we heard it meowing at night. And I went down with the flashlight looking for it, found it, but it was too afraid of me to get near. So I started feeding it through the vent in the house, and every day when I got home at work, kind of make it the same time. And the third day, I was sticking my arm in there, and it just came right up, and was friendly as could be. We were going to call animal control and let them take it. And a friend of mine that works for the Humane Society said, well, you can pay for their adoption fee up front to make sure they don't get killed, because as long as they're a friendly kitten and somebody knows they're going to have to pay less money to adopt it, that's the one they'll take. But my wife came outside and petted it a bit too, and I realized it wasn't going anywhere, so off to the vet again. And now we've got 3 cats and a dog that she rescued.
Well, just 3, that's not bad.
No, it could be worse, although I'm thinking we may have got the crazy cat lady starter kit here. And
Yeah, we had 2, and one of them died, and everybody who's a friend is like, you should get another one so he has a friend. Like, no, I think we're good with 1. And we have cats in our backyard that we've had since we moved into our house, and we just feed them. We just never let them in, so that seems to work nicely for, you can at least look at them. I never want to get that close. So I haven't had that experience of transitioning. We did it as a kid, but not since we've been living here. So do you think the kind of religious nuts in North Carolina could compete with the ones in Georgia? Think if there's a throwdown, who would win?
Oh, I don't know who would win. There's definitely some equality from what I've seen and heard about going on down there. I can tell you, if you're going to reduce the religious nuts down to one county, I think I live in the county in North Carolina that could win the whole thing. Our local school district is currently dealing with the FFRF because they have been allowing local ministers to teach biblical creationism in classrooms to elementary school kids. And the FFRF told them to stop, and they had an emergency student council meeting where 90% of the school parents showed up ready to lynch anyone who spoke out against preachers teaching the kids the Bible in the classroom. So the few people that showed up to speak out against it ended up not doing so out of fear, because it was definitely a lynch mob mentality and standing room only, and they were spilling out into the street. Apparently it was such a big issue. The other one going on, we got the ACLU. I think they gave up on it when they ruled that town in Virginia could start their town meetings with prayer, but our county commissioners were praying too, and the ACLU was trying to get that to stop, because when someone suggested something as simple as, you could say the prayer before you slam the gavel and then it's not part of the meeting, and they refused to do that and basically said anybody who didn't like the prayer could go out in the hallway till the praying was over and then come back in.
Yeah,
And
I like that. It's like if we're in charge, we don't
mhm.
realize it when other people want equality. I think that was the Greece case that gave basically said that it was okay to do it as long as other groups got to do it. But it does sound like, from what I'm hearing, that a lot of places are basically Christian only when it comes to their kind of invocation. Or anytime a non-Christian group people get really upset because they kind of rule the school. I mean, I'm in Atlanta itself, so I just see a bunch of churches. But yeah, I've heard in like other areas in Georgia, like where Bobby and Ashley are, they're been kind of having issues close to them.
Mm.
I think if no one complains, then basically they do whatever they want. So
Mm.
yeah, been hearing a lot of freedom of religion or freedom from religion getting involved in all these. Okay, so we had the very big issue happen, the shooting in Chapel Hill. How was kind of the local media reaction to that? Since I've kind of heard the national reaction that's sort
Yeah.
of faded over a week or two.
No, our local media has definitely fixated on the fact that he was an atheist. It wasn't jerk kills students over parking spaces. It was atheist kills Muslims, and parking spaces sometimes not even mentioned as part of the problem. I mean,
Yeah,
and to turn it around, at least in my head, would be to publish something like Christians picket military funerals when it's just the Westboro Baptist Church. I mean, I don't think they'd want people to say that those guys represent all of Christianity any more than we would want him to be seen as representing all of us.
yeah. I think it was I don't know. I mean, what happened was a tragedy. It was a horrible thing. I mean, 3 lives lost. That's the bottom line. I think we're pretty much universal in saying murder is bad, but for some reason now it seems like if someone gets killed, then everybody who's at all tangentially related has to condemn the act as if there's a reason when it would be okay. And I think there have been a lot of people like Cash and some other podcasters who have really, done a good job kind of explaining that we don't have any holy books, and sure the guy posted stuff on Facebook, but it sounded like a disturbed individual, and I don't think that's not even the focus. I mean, just people shooting other people in this country and how often it happens, and we seem to not pay attention. And like the only time we notice a murder is if it's one type of person killing a different type. If it's like the same, then it's okay. It's like Muslims killing Muslims, Christians killing Christians. But if it's a different type, then it becomes newsworthy. I just don't know how many the legs this has and what ultimately is going to come out of it. But it's just sad that that's the focus. Like, oh, let's put a label on this guy, and then everybody else associated with him is bad. Okay.
Yeah, and I'd like to see somebody in the national media pick this up and put the same spin on it that Cash did. I mean, yeah, he was dead right, but he kind of preaches to the choir. The people that really needed to hear that aren't listening to him.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when atheist gets in the news, it's associated with someone who killed 3 people. I mean, the only thing is that this guy's going to go through the legal system and, hopefully, I don't know, to get what he deserves. I don't really know what someone who kills 3 people deserves, honestly. If you're going to put him in jail for the rest of his life, I don't know. It's just a sad situation. I just was kind of interested for someone who's, in the state, what you were hearing as opposed to kind of the national view that we're getting, or the filtered view that we get, because obviously we're listening to a lot of atheist voices regarding this. But to get away from the kind of morbid, so when it comes to atheist podcasts, what are some of your favorites?
Definitely. Well, of course, no religion required, and Atheists on Air, Cognitive Dissonance, Barroom Atheist, Scathing Atheist. would listen to Deborah's. I really like that. I guess it still counts as part of Atheists on Air, but they're using their space or something.
Yeah, Beyond the
Beyond the
Trailer
Trailer
Park.
Park. I've been enjoying that. The new one, Unbuckling the Bible Belt. I just started with Atheist Nomads and Coronify Me. I listened to one episode before Paul took his little sabbatical, so I have yet to hear any more, but I think he's got an episode out that I can probably listen to at work tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a
But
new
so
one
far, I've liked
out
what I
this week.
heard.
Yeah, he just posted a new one. It was either yesterday or today. So, oh yeah, he's got a lot. I like what you said. You mentioned no religion required, like catching up from the beginning. I think Thinking Atheist was one like that, and I think Dogma Debates. Like you discover a show, and then you're like, I want to go back to the beginning, and then you just binge listen, and then you get sad when you have to wait a week or a month
Mm-hmm.
between episodes.
No, it's that way, and there were a couple of them, especially with the skeptical podcasts, where I didn't go all the way back because, like, by the time I found Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, they'd been at it for 5 or 6 years, so I just went back maybe a year and a half and started listening from there. Also, the skeptical podcast versus the atheist ones are a little more fixated on current events and what's going on now, so some of the older stuff isn't necessarily as valid, except to compare those things in your own mind to what's going on now.
Yeah, I think if you're completist, you just want to hear it from the beginning, but I think that's a sign of a good podcast. You can either go back to the beginning, or you can just kind of listen to them each week, and then see the evolution. So before we call it an evening, Jim, do you have any questions that you want to ask me?
What got you started doing this?
Well, I've been listening to podcasts for I don't even know how long, 3 to 4 years, and I kept thinking, can I do one, or do I get to, I don't know, get to know people a little bit better? I've been doing on the fantasy football side. I've been doing interviews since like 2011, and I'm like, well, I can interview atheists as well. But really, this show started as an idea where I was just going to talk about podcasts. Each episode would be me talking about a different podcast, and No Religion Required was the first one. And it was Bobby, who I was in touch with, was like, I'll show up and talk to you. So I'm like, okay, we'll make it an interview show. So it was kind of an interview show to talk to podcasters, but just to get to know them and to get to people to just kind of, know the face behind the voice or something. And even though you're not doing a show, I think it's been cool to get to talk to you and just, talk to another person. We got, this one thing in common. I bet we have more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and sometimes it can depend on where you are with things too. Like I was part of the movement and going to conferences and listening to other atheist podcasts, but met Bill and Susie before I'd ever heard their podcast, and they told me about it, and then I started listening. But I was caught up by the time I saw them again at ReasonCon, and that somehow made things different. Bobby, I really felt like I knew him because he put so much of himself forward in those beginning episodes. The ones he claims are so rough, and I don't think he likes them as well as he likes the newer stuff, and I don't know that anyone else does either, but I, for one, was definitely enjoying what I had heard this first 4 or 5 episodes before ReasonCon. So I was kind of thrilled to meet him because, like I said, I could pull my wife aside and say, hey, remember that one we were listening to in the car on the way here? This is Bobby right here. That was kind of nice.
And I guess as someone who's, I've lived in Atlanta since 1996, just to hear an atheist podcast where people have southern accents, I just like that. Because we're in whatever the Bible Belt is, because I think I've described the Bible Belt as coming from the big and tall store, because it's very large. It's pretty much covering the entire country. So to hear, people talking about that, it's just cool. But before we call it a night, now I forgot one question now. What are some of the good local beers? Because when I get to Hickory, I definitely don't want to check out some of them.
Okay, well, I can give you a list that's too long to deal with, unfortunately. But when you're in town, yeah, definitely. I think I had mentioned to you in the message or email the Old Hickory Tap Room. That's a local, not just a bar. They carry a lot of North Carolina beers, but they also brew their own there. They've got 6 or 7, and they're quite good. Um, as far as things from Asheville, you mentioned Highland already. French Broad Brewing is great. Wicked Weed is a new one I haven't even tried yet, but I'm hearing nothing but good about them. Wedge Brewing, Nantahala, Lexington Avenue Brewery, Green Man, Asheville Pizza and Brewing. What else is local around here? There's Blowing Rock Brewing Company. I can't say I'm as thrilled with them, though they're still pretty new and they only have 2 or 3 out. So as they evolve, things might get interesting. We also have some going the other way too. Natty Greens in Greensboro makes excellent beer. We've got Foothills in Winston-Salem. I don't care for most of their beers, but they do make I guess I'd call it an American pale ale called Rainbow Trout that I just love. But yeah, if you end up at any of these places with me, I'll definitely point you in the right direction out of what is there. And Charlotte's starting to get some good breweries too. We get Old Mecklenburg Brewing Company, Noda, Birdsong, and they're all pretty good.
Well, I'm already ready to go. I'm already like getting in my car and heading down, but I will be there on April 24th. Depending on everything, I might try to get there in time for lunch so we can kind of meet up because I know everything kind of starts that evening. But anyway, I'm going to do a little closing statement and then we will say good night. So let's close on a thought on negativity. I've had what you could call a negative life event when I lost my job last week. Yes, I know where it is. That's not the point. I listen to a lot of atheist podcasts, a period, lot, period. They're chock full of stories about religious people behaving badly, and I'd put them in the negative category as it makes you a little afraid of the world you live in. There are some of us, like the lovely and talented Paul of Chronify Me, who had to tap out and take a break. It's good to take a break. It's also good to take a moment and remember all the cool people we've met on this journey and what it means to have allies in what I call sanity. So I'm adding Jim to the list of allies. Thank you, Jim. People can find you on Facebook, Jim Dobler. And I don't know if there's any other place, but I'm going to say before we go, Zachrilege, that's the name you can trust, or that's how you can find me on Twitter. You can also find the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook, where I try to link to as many podcasts as humanly possible. You can also email me at zachrilege dot, the actual dot, not the word cast, at Gmail. So once again, thank you, Jim. It's been really good to get to talk to you in person. And good night to everybody. Good luck, or e pluribus unum.
Thank you for having me on as a guest. I really enjoyed this.
It's been a lot of fun, so thank you.
And I'll